Catherine Mills stood at the edge of the grand ballroom of the Chicago Hilton, a champagne flute untouched in her hand. The annual Tech Innovation Gala, despite its glittering chandeliers and carefully curated guest list, felt suffocating. As CEO of Mills Technology Solutions, she'd attended countless such events, but tonight felt different. Perhaps it was the constant stream of well-meaning friends who kept steering eligible bachelors in her direction. If you love your family and want to listen to amazing and shocking stories, click on subscribe and avoid 20 years of bad luck in your life. Catherine, darling, have you met Richard? He's on the board of 3 Fortune 500 companies. Charlotte Weber, her longtime friend and fellow tech executive, practically pushed a silver-haired man toward her. Catherine managed a polite smile but quickly excused herself, moving toward the back of the room where several young people sat, clearly out of their element in the formal setting. That's when she first noticed him. A tall man in a well-worn but tasteful suit was speaking quietly to the young attendees, his presence both commanding and gentle. Unlike the practiced charm of the executives around her, his interactions seemed genuine, his smile reaching his eyes as he listened to a teenage girl describing something with animated gestures. That's Marcus Johnson. Charlotte appeared at her elbow again. He runs that community center in Southside. The young people are scholarship recipients from his program. Quite admirable work, though I can't imagine why he doesn't seek a more profitable position. Catherine found herself drawn to the group, observing how Marcus expertly helped the young people navigate the intimidating social setting. His quiet confidence and obvious dedication to his protégés stood in stark contrast to the networking-focused interactions around them. 2 days later, Catherine found herself parking her Tesla outside the Southside Community Center. The building was modest but well-maintained, with colorful murals decorating its walls and teens clustered around picnic tables in the small courtyard. Inside, she found Marcus leading a coding workshop, his sleeves rolled up as he moved from student to student. Ms. Mills, he greeted her with that same genuine smile she'd noticed at the gala. I wondered if we might see you here after the other night. No fawning, no obvious attempt to curry favor with the wealthy visitor. Just simple acknowledgement. Please, call me Catherine, she replied, taking in the busy classroom. I was impressed by your students at the gala. I thought perhaps Mills Technology could offer some support to your program. Over the next hour, Marcus showed her around the center. Computer labs running on donated equipment, a small library doubling as a tutoring center, and a kitchen where volunteers prepared meals for students who might otherwise go hungry. Catherine found herself increasingly impressed, not just by the programs, but by Marcus's vision for what the center could become. In the following weeks, Catherine's visits became more frequent. She started by offering technical expertise, upgrading the center's computer systems, and implementing a proper network. But soon she found herself involved in other ways, tutoring students in business skills, attending community meetings, and learning about the daily challenges faced by the families the center served. The transformation wasn't just in the center. With each visit, Catherine felt more alive, more purposeful. The corporate world she'd inhabited for so long suddenly seemed shallow in comparison to the real impact she could make here. And if she found herself looking forward to her conversations with Marcus, well, that was just professional interest, wasn't it? The students began to open up to her, sharing their dreams and fears. One afternoon, as she helped a girl named Tamika with her college application essay, Catherine realized she hadn't thought about her social circle's expectations or her own loneliness in weeks. Instead, she found herself fully engaged in the community's struggles and triumphs, with Marcus's quiet strength and unwavering dedication serving as an inspiration. Catherine sat across from Marcus at a small Italian restaurant several blocks from the community center. Away from the constant activity of the center, she noticed how his shoulders relaxed slightly, though his eyes remained alert, scanning the room occasionally out of what seemed like habit. My mother worked 3 jobs, Marcus said, breaking a piece of bread. The community center, back then, not this one, but similar. It was the only safe place I had after school. That's why I understand these kids. When you don't have stability at home, you need somewhere to belong. Catherine nodded, noting how he skipped over certain years in his story, jumping from his teenage years directly to his college scholarship. His brief mention of security work caught her attention, but he changed the subject quickly, asking about her plans for the center's computer lab. The security training must have been intense, she probed gently, but Marcus just smiled and steered the conversation toward the upcoming fundraiser. Back in her corporate circle, the whispers had already started. At a board meeting, Catherine overheard Thompson, one of her senior executives, muttering to another board member, "She's spending an awful lot of time in that neighborhood. And with that community center director, it's inappropriate for someone in her position. What would Stephen think?" The mention of her late husband stung, but Catherine straightened her spine and addressed the room with professional detachment. "Our community involvement initiative has already generated positive press and improved our local recruitment pipeline. Mr. Johnson's program has produced several promising tech candidates." The fundraising event proved her point. Catherine had transformed the community center's gymnasium into an elegant venue. Local businesses, corporate sponsors, and community members mingled as students demonstrated their coding projects. Marcus stood near a group of teenagers, helping them prepare for their presentations. Miss Catherine, Tamika, one of the regular students, rushed over. "We just got another donation. That's 3 times what we hoped for." Catherine watched as Marcus directed the students, noting how he kept them focused while still allowing their enthusiasm to shine. He caught her eye across the room and smiled, a genuine expression that made her ignore the disapproving looks from some of her social circle who had attended. Later that evening, as the last guests departed, Marcus helped Catherine pack up the donation materials. "You didn't have to do all this," he said quietly. "The center deserves support," she replied, carefully stacking the pledge forms. "These kids deserve a chance. That's not what I meant." Marcus paused his work. "You're taking heat from your board, aren't you? Because of me, because of where I come from." Catherine met his gaze directly. "My board's concerns are irrelevant. The work we're doing here matters." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Marcus finally broke eye contact, returning to his task, but something had shifted, acknowledging the growing connection between them while highlighting the complications they faced. The following week, Catherine attended a charity luncheon where Charlotte cornered her by the ladies' room. "Darling, you know I support your philanthropic efforts, but this involvement with the community center and its director, it's raising eyebrows. There are rumors. There are always rumors." "Charlotte," Catherine replied evenly, though her hand tightened on her purse. "He's from a completely different world, Catherine. What do you really know about him? About his past? Stephen would want you to be careful." Catherine felt her patience snap. "Stephen would want me to be happy and to make a difference. Marcus and the center are doing both." The words hung in the air, Catherine realizing too late how much she'd revealed. Charlotte's expression shifted from concern to calculation, and Catherine knew the conversation would be repeated at every social gathering in their circle. Walking to her car later, Catherine found herself questioning not her involvement with the center, but her growing feelings for Marcus. Every time she thought she understood him, another layer of mystery emerged. His dedication to the community was clear, but his past remained shadowy, full of careful omissions that both intrigued and concerned her. One evening, after a particularly long board meeting, Catherine found herself back at the community center. Most of the students had gone home, but light still spilled from Marcus's office. She found him reviewing grant applications, his desk covered in paperwork. "Stephen died 2 years ago," Catherine said without preamble, settling into a chair across from him. "Heart attack. Everyone expected me to fall apart, to sell the company, to retreat into grief. Instead, I threw myself into work." Marcus set down his pen, giving her his full attention. The silence between them felt comfortable, encouraging her to continue. The truth is, I was lonely long before he died. We had a good marriage, but in the last few years, we lived separate lives. He had his ventures, I had mine. When he passed, I realized I'd been going through the motions for years. The galas, the board meetings, the charity events, none of it felt real. And now, Marcus asked quietly, now I'm terrified, Catherine admitted. Not of the gossip or the board's disapproval, but of feeling something real again, of caring about people who might disappear. Marcus's expression tightened momentarily, a flash of pain crossing his features. He stood up, moving to the window that overlooked the basketball court. Everyone has ghosts, Catherine. Some of us just hide them better than others. She watched him, noting the tension in his shoulders. You don't have to tell me everything, Marcus, but I know you're carrying something heavy. The security work I did, he began, then stopped. A group of teenagers passed by outside, their laughter floating through the window. It wasn't just regular security. I specialized in extraction operations, getting people out of dangerous situations. Catherine waited, sensing there was more he wasn't ready to share. The way he watched the teenagers, his protective instincts evident even now, told her his past work and his current mission were connected. The next day, Catherine arrived at the center to find unusual activity. Marcus was coordinating with several serious-looking individuals, speaking in low, urgent tones. When he saw her, he tried to wrap up quickly, but she'd already noticed the maps and documents spread across the table. There's a situation, he said briefly. A teenager in trouble. We're organizing an extraction. We, Catherine asked. Before Marcus could answer, one of his colleagues approached with a phone. The conversation that followed was terse, filled with coded language that Catherine only partially understood. But she recognized the shift in Marcus's demeanor. This was a side of him she hadn't seen before, confident and commanding. The operation moved quickly after that. Catherine found herself helping coordinate transportation and safe houses. Her business acumen proving unexpectedly useful in crisis management. It wasn't until late that night, when a young girl was safely delivered to a waiting family member, that Catherine fully understood what Marcus's organization did. You rescue trafficking victims? She said quietly as they sat in his office afterward. The reality of his work, the danger involved, and the weight he carried suddenly became clear. Marcus nodded slowly. It started after my own experience. But that's a longer story. He looked exhausted, the careful walls he maintained starting to crack. Catherine reached across the desk, taking his hand. The contact seemed to surprise him, but he didn't pull away. When you're ready to tell that story, I'll listen. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. One of Marcus's colleagues entered with urgent news. They'd received information about another potential victim. As Marcus switched back into operational mode, Catherine saw both sides of him clearly. The compassionate community leader and the skilled operative, each role shaped by experiences he was only beginning to share. The disruption came on a Tuesday afternoon. Catherine was helping with a coding class when a commotion at the front desk drew Marcus's attention. Through the office window, she saw him freeze, his entire body tensing at the sight of a man in an expensive suit. Everyone stay in the classroom, Marcus instructed, his voice calm but firm. Catherine watched as he approached the visitor, their conversation quickly becoming heated despite their lowered voices. The man was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with an air of authority that seemed both familiar and threatening. His smile never reached his eyes as he spoke to Marcus, gesturing occasionally toward the students. Even from a distance, Catherine could see Marcus's knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the desk. Later that evening, after ensuring all students had safely left, Marcus finally explained, "That was James, my ex-husband." The revelation hung in the air. Catherine waited, sensing there was more. He's threatening to expose my past involvement in certain operations. Operations that, while legal, involved some controversial methods of extracting victims from dangerous situations. Marcus paced the office. He wants me to stop the current investigation I'm running. Says if I don't, he'll make sure everyone knows about the times I had to break laws to save lives. Why now? Catherine asked, keeping her voice steady despite her growing concern. Because the trafficking ring we're investigating, he's connected to it. I didn't know back then, when we were married, but I've gathered enough evidence now to prove it. Marcus stopped pacing, turning to face her. Catherine, you need to distance yourself from this. From me, your reputation, your company. Stop. Catherine stood up, closing the distance between them. I'm not going anywhere. We'll handle this together. You don't understand. James is dangerous. He has connections in places that make him virtually untouchable. The things he's capable of. Marcus's voice trailed off. Then we'll be smarter, Catherine insisted. My company has resources, legal teams. No. Marcus's sharp tone surprised them both. Catherine, I've seen what happens to people who try to fight him directly. The legal system, the media, even law enforcement. He has people everywhere. That's why we operate the way we do, under the radar. Catherine studied him for a moment. Then we stay under the radar, but I'm not walking away. I can't ask you to risk everything you've built, Marcus argued, his voice softening. Your company, your reputation. You're not asking, I'm choosing. Catherine's tone left no room for argument. Now, tell me everything I need to know about James and his operation. The next few hours were spent in intense discussion. Marcus revealed the extent of James's network, how he used legitimate businesses as fronts for human trafficking operations, and how he manipulated the legal system to protect himself. Each revelation made Catherine more certain of her decision to stay involved. There's something else, Marcus finally said, pulling out a file. James isn't just threatening to expose my past. He's been gathering information about you, your company, looking for vulnerabilities. Catherine took the file, scanning its contents. Financial records, personal information, even surveillance photos of her at various community center events. He's thorough. This is why you need to step back, Marcus insisted. He'll destroy everything you've worked for. Catherine closed the file deliberately. My father built Mills Technology from nothing. When he died, everyone said I couldn't run it. When Stephen died, they said the same thing. I'm still here. She met Marcus's gaze. I didn't get where I am by running from bullies, no matter how well connected they are. The determination in her voice seemed to both relieve and worry Marcus. If you're staying, we need to be careful. James will be watching everything we do now. Then let him watch, Catherine replied. Meanwhile, we'll do what needs to be done to protect these kids and stop his operation. The community center's main hall was packed for the emergency meeting. Catherine stood at the podium, facing concerned parents, students, and local residents. News of James's visit had spread, creating unease throughout the neighborhood. I understand your concerns, Catherine began, her voice clear and steady. There have been rumors about threats to the center, about dangerous people targeting our community. You deserve the truth. She paused, making eye contact with several familiar faces in the crowd. This center isn't just a building. It's a sanctuary for our children, a place of learning, and yes, a place of resistance against those who would prey on our community. Some people don't like that. They'd prefer we remain silent, vulnerable, and afraid. Marcus stood at the back of the room, watching as Catherine continued. Her words were having an effect. He could see heads nodding, expressions shifting from fear to determination. Mills Technology is increasing its investment in the center's security systems. We're installing new cameras, upgrading access controls, and providing emergency response training. But more importantly, we're strengthening our community bonds. Because united, we're stronger than any threat. After the meeting, several community leaders approached Catherine, offering support and resources. The local church offered to organize neighborhood watch groups. Business owners promised to keep alert for suspicious activity. The transformation from fearful individuals to a united community was palpable. Marcus found Catherine in his office later, planning the upcoming Unity Festival, an event they'd been organizing before James's appearance. "We should probably cancel," he suggested. "It's too exposed, too many potential risks." "That's exactly why we need to hold it," Catherine countered. "Canceling means James wins. The festival becomes a statement. We won't be intimidated." They spent the next few hours adapting their plans, incorporating additional security measures, while maintaining the event's celebratory spirit. Catherine's corporate experience merged seamlessly with Marcus's security background, creating layers of protection that wouldn't be obvious to attendees. "There's something else," Catherine said, pulling out her laptop. "I've been analyzing James's business connections. Look at these patterns." She showed Marcus a complex network of shell companies and financial transactions. "He's careful, but there are traces. We can use this." Their planning session was interrupted by an urgent knock. Tamika, one of their senior students, burst in. "Mr. Marcus, Miss Catherine, you need to see this." She pulled up a social media post on her phone. It was a thinly veiled threat, mentioning the upcoming festival and suggesting accidents happen when people don't mind their own business. "They're watching us," Marcus said quietly. "Let them," Catherine replied, her voice hard. "Every threat, every intimidation attempt, it's all evidence. Keep documenting everything." Later that evening, as they secured the center for the night, Catherine received a text message from an unknown number. It contained a photo of her leaving her corporate office earlier that day, followed by one simple line, "Walk away while you can." She showed it to Marcus, who immediately moved to check the streets through the windows. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. They're escalating." "Good," Catherine said, surprising him. "Every move they make shows their hand. We just need to be ready when they show too much." But Marcus wasn't convinced. "Catherine, these people, James, they don't just make threats. I've seen what happens when they follow through. Then we make sure they don't get the chance," she replied, already typing on her phone. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow. It's time to activate some of my own resources." The tension in the room was palpable as they realized they were crossing a line. James's direct threat to Catherine meant the conflict was entering a new phase. The Unity Festival was no longer just a community celebration. It was becoming a battleground. Catherine's office at Mills Technology buzzed with activity well past midnight. She and Marcus had converted the conference room into a command center, with laptops displaying security feeds from the community center and surrounding streets. "The festival gives us cover," Catherine explained, pointing to the venue layout. "While everyone's focused on the main events, we'll have teams monitoring James's key locations." She'd pulled in trusted security contractors, former colleagues of Marcus who understood the delicate nature of their operation. Marcus studied the plans, adding his own notes. "We need to be careful. James isn't just going to show up and make threats. He'll try to create chaos, probably target the weakest points first." Their strategy session was interrupted by an alert from the center's security system. On the monitor, they watched a figure attempting to access the back entrance. Marcus immediately recognized the method. It was a technique his team used during extractions. "He's using my own tactics against us," Marcus muttered, quickly coordinating with the security team they'd positioned nearby. The intruder fled before they could intercept him, but the message was clear. James wasn't just making idle threats. The next morning, Catherine led a different kind of meeting. She'd gathered the center's staff and key volunteer coordinators, turning their festival preparations into a sophisticated security operation. Each person was assigned specific roles and emergency protocols, all under the guise of normal event planning. "Remember," she instructed, "if anything seems out of place, no matter how small, report it through the chain we've established. Don't try to handle anything alone." Marcus watched her with a mixture of admiration and concern. She'd adapted to this high-stakes situation with remarkable skill, but he worried that she still didn't fully grasp the danger. His fears were confirmed when one of his contacts called with disturbing news. James has been meeting with members of your board, Marcus told her later, in private. He's planning something bigger than just disrupting the festival. Catherine's expression hardened. I know, Thompson's been acting strange, asking unusual questions about our community programs. I've got people watching him too. The day of the festival arrived with an unusual tension underlying the celebratory atmosphere. Catherine had positioned plainclothes security throughout the crowd, while Marcus coordinated with his team from a makeshift command center in his office. Everything seemed to be running smoothly until the first incident. A small fire broke out in the kitchen, forcing an evacuation of that section of the building. While the staff handled it efficiently, Marcus noticed something more concerning on the security feeds. They're testing our responses, he said, watching multiple screens. The fire was a distraction. Look, he pointed to footage showing someone accessing the center's computer room during the chaos. Catherine was already moving. I had it install a special program last week. Anyone trying to access our systems will trigger a silent alarm and leave a digital trail. But before they could track the intruder, screams erupted from the main hall. James had finally made his move, walking into the festival flanked by two men who barely concealed their weapons under their jackets. The crowd parted, creating a circle of fear around them. Marcus, James's voice carried across the room. I thought we had an understanding about keeping certain matters private. Catherine stepped forward, placing herself between James and the crowd of frightened attendees. Marcus moved to stop her, but she gave him a subtle signal. This was part of their plan. Mr. Warner, she addressed James by his legal name, her voice carrying clearly. I believe we need to discuss your recent business proposals in a more appropriate setting. The tension in the room shifted. James hadn't expected Catherine to take control of the situation so publicly. His eyes narrowed as he realized she was forcing him to either back down or show his hand in front of too many witnesses. The standoff in the main hall crackled with tension. James's fingers twitched near his jacket, where Catherine knew he carried a concealed weapon. Marcus had positioned himself to protect both Catherine and the nearest group of students, his training evident in his stance. You've always had a flair for the dramatic, Marcus, James said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Do these people know who you really are, what you've done? They know exactly who I am, Marcus replied steadily. A man who helps people escape from men like you. James's practiced smile faltered. You think you're so noble now, running this little sanctuary. Shall I tell them about Belgrade? About the warehouse fire in Mexico City? You mean the operations where I rescued trafficking victims? Marcus took a step forward. Go ahead. Tell them how I stopped your organization from selling children. Tell them how many lives you've destroyed. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Some had their phones out, recording everything. James noticed, his composure cracking slightly. You're making a mistake, Marcus. Both of you are. James's gaze shifted to Catherine. Some things should stay buried. Like your husband's real cause of death, Ms. Mills. Stress-induced heart attack, wasn't it? Or was it something in his evening scotch? Catherine's voice cut through the tension. Are you confessing to murder, Mr. Warner? Because every word you're saying is being recorded and transmitted to multiple secure locations. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across James's face. He glanced at his men, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with the growing crowd of witnesses. You really think your little recordings can touch me? James snarled, dropping all pretense of civility. I own judges. I own police chiefs. I own former police chiefs. A new voice interrupted. Detective Sarah Chen stepped out from the crowd, her badge visible. The ones you owned. They're singing quite a song for the federal investigation. James's hand moved toward his jacket, but Marcus was faster. In one fluid motion, he crossed the space between them, disarming James before he could draw his weapon. The two men grappled, years of shared history and violence culminating in this moment. Catherine watched as Marcus finally confronted his past, literally and figuratively. James fought dirty, landing several hard blows, But Marcus's training and determination proved stronger. When James tried to pull a hidden knife, Marcus trapped his arm in a hold that made James cry out in pain. "It's over," Marcus said firmly, as Detective Chin's team moved in to secure James and his men. "The evidence is already out there, all of it." James, even while being handcuffed, managed one last venomous smile. "You think this ends with me? The organization is bigger than one person. They'll come for all of you. Let them come." Catherine stepped forward, her voice carrying across the Nasiland hall. "Because what we've built here is bigger than your organization. Every person you've threatened, every life you've tried to destroy, they're all standing with us now." As the police led James away, Marcus finally allowed himself to slump slightly, the adrenaline fading. Catherine moved to his side, supporting him both physically and emotionally. The crowd, which had watched the entire confrontation in stunned silence, burst into applause. Students and parents rushed forward, forming a protective circle around Marcus and Catherine. What had started as a potential tragedy had transformed into a moment of community triumph. Later, in the quiet of Marcus's office, Catherine tended to his injuries, while Detective Chen debriefed them both. "We've been building this case for months," Chen explained. "Your documentation and financial tracking gave us the final pieces we needed." James's outburst today was just the cherry on top. The community center was transformed for the solidarity event, which took on new meaning after James's arrest. Banners celebrating unity and resilience hung from the walls, and the atmosphere buzzed with renewed energy. Students, parents, and supporters packed the main hall, all sharing a sense of victory. Local news crews positioned their cameras as Catherine surveyed the scene from the back of the room. The past week had been a whirlwind of police statements, press releases, and meetings with her board of directors. Mills Technologies' stock had taken a brief hit when the story broke, but rebounded strongly after the full scope of Catherine's role in exposing the trafficking ring became public. "The press wants another statement," her PR director whispered, gesturing to the gathering reporters. "They're especially interested in the connection between Mills, technology, and the community center's anti-trafficking initiatives." Catherine shook her head. "Today isn't about corporate publicity. This is Marcus's moment." As if on cue, Marcus took the stage. The bruises from his fight with James were still visible, but he stood tall, his presence commanding the room's attention. The crowd fell silent as he approached the microphone. "A year ago, this center was just a place for after-school programs and computer classes," he began. "Today, it stands as proof that when a community unites, no force can tear it apart." His eyes found Catherine in the crowd. "But we wouldn't be here without someone who saw beyond social barriers and corporate boundaries. Someone who proved that true leadership isn't about maintaining power, but about using it to protect others." Catherine felt the room's attention shift to her as Marcus continued. Catherine Mills didn't just provide resources. She put herself on the line. When others warned her to stay away, she stepped closer. When threats came, she stood firm. She showed us all what real courage looks like. The applause that followed was deafening. Students whom Catherine had tutored held up signs thanking her. Parents whose children she had helped protect wiped away tears. Even her board members, who had initially opposed her involvement with the center, joined in the standing ovation. Later, during the reception, Catherine found herself in a quiet corner with Marcus. "That speech wasn't necessary," she said softly. "It was completely necessary," he countered. "But it wasn't just for you. It was for everyone who's ever been told to stay in their lane, to not get involved, to look the other way." They were interrupted by Tamika, who rushed up with her laptop. "Miss Catherine, Mr. Marcus, you need to see this. The police just released the initial findings from James's files. The document detailed the extent of James's operation, including names of corrupt officials and business leaders. But something about the dates caught Catherine's attention. She remembered James's comment about her husband's death and felt a chill. "Marcus," she said quietly, "these trafficking routes, They match Stephen's business trips exactly. Marcus studied the documents, his expression grave. Catherine, if Stephen was involved, then his death might not have been natural, she finished. But why would James hint at that? He had to know it would lead back to his organization. Unless there's something bigger we still don't know, Marcus replied. Something worth risking exposure to keep hidden. The celebration continued around them, but Catherine's mind was racing. She had thought closing this chapter would bring peace, but instead, it had opened a door to even darker questions about her past. We don't have to pursue this, Marcus offered, seeing her expression. Some truths come with a heavy price. Catherine straightened her shoulders. Truth is never the enemy, Marcus. No matter how painful. She looked around the room, at the community that had become her new family. Besides, we make a pretty good team when it comes to exposing secrets. Catherine spent late nights in her home office, surrounded by files and financial records from Stephen's final years. Her corporate training helped her spot patterns, irregular wire transfers, meetings in cities known for trafficking, and communications with shell companies now linked to James's network. Look at this, she told Marcus, spreading documents across her desk. Stephen made regular payments to a consulting firm in Singapore. The same firm appears in James's records as a laundering operation. Marcus leaned in, studying the transactions. These aren't small amounts. Stephen wasn't just involved. He was a major player. But why would James kill him? Catherine wondered aloud. Stephen was clearly valuable to the operation. Before Marcus could respond, Catherine's secure phone, the one Detective Chen had provided, buzzed with an urgent message. A raid on one of James's properties had uncovered a hidden server room. The decrypted files were starting to paint a disturbing picture. They found evidence of a power struggle, Marcus read from the report. Stephen was planning to take control of the entire network. James found out and eliminated the competition. Catherine sat heavily in her chair. All those years, I thought I knew him. We shared a bed, a life, and I never suspected. Catherine, Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. We need to move carefully here. If Stephen was as deeply involved as these records suggest, some of his old allies might still be active. As if confirming his fears, Catherine's personal email pinged with a new message. The sender was anonymous, but the content was clear. A single photo of Stephen in a meeting with known trafficking kingpins, dated just weeks before his death. They're warning us, Marcus said grimly, trying to stop us from digging deeper. Catherine's response was to forward the email to Detective Chen, then turn back to the financial records. If they're worried about what we'll find, we must be getting close to something important. Over the next few days, they pieced together more of the puzzle. Stephen hadn't just been involved in trafficking, he'd been developing a sophisticated technology platform to automate and expand the operation. The same technology that Catherine's company had unknowingly refined and improved after his death. This is why James was so interested in Mill's technology. Catherine realized. The company's current security software is built on Stephen's original framework. They're probably still using modified versions of it. Their investigation took on new urgency when Marcus's contacts reported increased activity around known trafficking sites. They're moving people, he explained, tracking locations on a digital map, lots of them. They're either expanding operations or preparing to eliminate evidence. Catherine finished. She pulled up her company's latest security protocols. If they're using our software, maybe we can use that against them. Create a backdoor. That would be highly illegal, Marcus warned. So is human trafficking, Catherine countered, her fingers already flying over the keyboard. Besides, I own the company. I'm just conducting an internal security audit. Their breakthrough came at 3 in the morning. Catherine had found a hidden subroutine in the security software, Stephen's signature backdoor. Through it, they could track the entire trafficking network's communications. My God, Marcus breathed, watching the data stream across the screen. This isn't just about moving people. They're selling information to government secrets, corporate espionage. Stephen wasn't just building a trafficking network, Catherine said, her voice hard. He was creating an intelligence black market. That's why they're so desperate to keep this hidden. A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Detective Chen entered, her expression grim. We've got a problem. James escaped custody an hour ago, and he's not the only one. 3 other key suspects, all gone within minutes of each other. They had help, Marcus stated. High-level help. Catherine was already moving, grabbing her coat. We need to get back to the center. If they're making their move, that's where they'll strike first. Catherine and Marcus raced through Chicago's empty streets toward the community center. Detective Chen had dispatched units to the location, but Catherine's gut told her they wouldn't arrive in time. Wait, a voice called out just as they reached the center's parking lot. A figure emerged from the shadows. A man Catherine recognized instantly. Michael, she gasped, facing her brother whom she hadn't seen in 3 years. What are you doing here? Michael Mills stepped into the light, his FBI badge glinting. I've been undercover in James's organization for the past 2 years. When I heard about the escape, I knew they'd come here. Marcus tensed, positioning himself between Catherine and her brother. Prove you're really FBI. Michael slowly reached into his jacket, producing not just his badge but a file. Operation Shutdown 8. That's what Stephen called it. The intelligence gathering operation he built using trafficked people as unwitting agents. Catherine, I've been trying to bring this down since before Stephen died. You knew. Catherine's voice cracked. You knew what Stephen was involved in. I couldn't tell you. It would have blown my cover and gotten you killed. Stephen suspected someone was investigating him. That's why he accelerated his plans. A noise from inside the center interrupted them. Through the security cameras on Catherine's phone, they could see James and several armed men entering through the back entrance. They're after the servers, Michael explained quickly. Your discovery of the back door triggered their failsafe. They're here to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. Marcus was already moving, his tactical experience taking over. How many men? 6, with James. More on the way. Michael checked his weapon. I've called in my FBI task force, but they're 20 minutes out. Catherine pulled up the center's security controls on her phone. I can lock down sections of the building, control the lights. We can trap them. What followed was a carefully orchestrated operation. Catherine used the center's security systems to separate James's team, sealing them in different sections of the building. Marcus and Michael moved silently through the darkness, neutralizing the threats one by one. James, realizing he was being hunted, made his way to the computer lab. Catherine watched through the cameras as he began downloading files, his movements frantic. He's desperate, Michael observed. The files he's trying to access, they'll implicate hundreds of powerful people. Politicians, business leaders, judges. Good, Catherine said firmly. Let them all fall. The final confrontation came in the main hall. James, cornered and desperate, held a dead man's switch. One press, he warned, and every server containing evidence gets wiped. Your brother's investigation dies with it. It's already too late. Catherine stepped into view, her voice steady. While you were downloading files, I was uploading everything to secure FBI servers. It's over, James. You think this ends with me? James laughed bitterly. Stephen built this. Your company perfected it. You're as much a part of this as anyone. You're right, Catherine agreed. Which is why I'm dismantling it. All of it. Mills' technology will be dedicated to fighting trafficking, not enabling it. The FBI breach team burst in at that moment, led by Michael's supervisor. James, realizing he had lost, made one final desperate move toward Catherine, but Marcus was faster. The takedown was swift and final. Hours later, as the sun rose over Chicago, Catherine, Marcus, and Michael watched as FBI agents carried out boxes of evidence from the center. It's really over, Catherine said softly. This chapter, as Marcus corrected, taking her hand. But we've got more work to do. Michael nodded in agreement. The center's already proved it can be a force for good. Imagine what it could do with Mill's technologies, full resources behind it. Catherine looked at the building that had changed her life, at the man who had helped her find her true purpose, and at the brother who had protected her from the shadows. Then, let's get to work, she said, stepping forward into the morning light. We've got a lot of people to help.